Welcome to League Legends. It's hard to imagine how a young centre who kicks 7 goals on Origin debut and is involved in both his team's tries could subsequently be called lazy. But that was just one of the labels stuck onto a young Meninga as he emerged onto the big stage from places a little bit off Rugby League's Broadway, Brisbane Souths and the fledgling Canberra Raiders. It could have all ended right there, of course, but it didn't. And in the end, the world ran out of labels worthy enough to describe the career of a rugby league giant. And of course, it's still raging along. Meninga, welcome to League Legends.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you.
I wonder if we would be sitting here talking if it had all ended when you broke your arm in 1987. 4 times, as it turns out.
In my mind, it wasn't the end for me, basically, so even though I went through a torrid time with the injury, but at the end of the day, it made me more hungrier. I wanted to play the game again. I felt that my better years are still in front of me.
You're born in Bundaberg and you moved to Monto not long after, didn't you? Is it fair to say you were born into rugby league?
I was born into rugby league. Yeah, Dad was a great bush rugby league player. Played for Bundaberg, Maryborough, Wandai, Monto, Thangool in his time. Played for Wide Bay. And all those Blimber Cup days, and played against the French and the Poms, through the bush when they came out and did the Lions tours and the French tours. And he played for, I think it was something like 22 years and played in 21, or was associated with 20 and 21 grand finals. So he was hugely successful in the game of rugby league. He
was a big, good-looking rooster, wasn't he? And your mother was quite tall. And you're pretty much the spitting image of your dad.
He was Australian South Sea Islander, so I mean he was brought up in a family rich of culture around the islanders, and Mum was born and bred in Wandai, in the bush. So they met through the 50s. Got married in 1959, and I was a product of that marriage, I think. But they're great people. I hugely respect them, and I thank them for everything they've done for me.
Respect them even more, I'd imagine, because that was a mixed-race marriage at a time when that couldn't have been easy in Australia.
No, it wasn't easy. It was, knowing the story, it wasn't well received by both families, basically. So I remember seeing a photo just recently of Mum and Dad getting married in a church all by themselves, no family around them. Mum's family eventually turned up, and I think Dad's family eventually turned up, but on the wedding day, they had no support whatsoever.
In terms of your childhood, Mal, did you have, I guess, the best of it and the worst of it? Was there a dividing line between when things were great and when they weren't so great?
A lot of racism, when I grew up, but I think I was protected from it a lot by Mum and Dad, considering obviously both their backgrounds. So I was just taught to be respectful, be well-mannered, make sure that, I do always do the right thing. And I think I achieved that, But Dad always said to me, if they do say anything about your colour or anything about who you are, if they got a smile on their face, well, obviously they're just joking. If they're not, well, then you got to stick up for yourself. So I don't know how many fights I got into when I was a kid, but at the end of the day, I think it held me in good stead, as I grew older.
Tell the story of the police academy, why and when you went there and who you met there.
I always wanted to be a policeman. When I grew up, prior to 15 years of age, I watched all the police shows on TV, and I used to be a fan of Enid Blyton and Famous Five or The Secret Seven, all those stories, and I always wanted to be a policeman. So it's just coincidentally, fate has it. Well, I went there in 76 with the 3-year cadetship, and this long, tall, streaky fella came up to me and said, "You play rugby league?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay." He said, then he walked away. That's what Wayne's like, just asks a question, disappears. And then, I just went on about my business, and I knew that the Queensland Police Force had a rugby league team, and the rugby league team played what they call the Super A's, which is against all the other district teams. So it's north, south, east, west, Wynnum, Redcliffe. So it was pretty high competition. And then what I didn't realise is who he was or who he played for, or, he indicates the academy side. But having him in my life at that time of my life was extraordinarily good for me from a rugby league perspective, and be forever thankful for meeting him in '76 and And then, you know, the thing that stands out for me, and I tell this all the time, Tim, he had us in a group in 77. It was the Queensland Police Academy side, and he went through every individual in the team in this circle and just intimated what he thought of them and, you know, their potential and all that sort of stuff. And he came to me and he said to me, Mal, you can do anything in life as long as you put your mind to it. And that struck a chord with me. So I went away and I just did some goals. He introduced me to goal setting. I said, I want to play for Queensland, you know, 1979, or when I actually said I want to play for Queensland in 1979, and that was one of the goals I set myself. And ever since then, because of that influence and someone who believed in me, I've been doing it ever since, and it seems to work.
And in 79, when you went to Souths, he was there.
He was there. Wayne was instrumental in making me realise that I had some potential as a rugby league player. At that time, I just wanted to be a policeman. I had no ambitions around, you know, rugby league at all, really. It was just wanting to be a policeman. So I first met Wayne and wasn't happy there because we lost the grand final. But, you know, Wayne was instrumental in finding my way. So he was the first one who introduced me to goals and goal setting, and he had belief in me, and he set me on the right path. And, you know, I followed him to South and, you know, quickly realised that I was talented.
Sydney clubs at this point heard about you, didn't they? Who was the first to contact you? The Dragons
contacted me. It was an interesting conversation. Harry Bath came up. Dad was there. Dad wanted me to go down to Sydney, but the conversation went that they were just going to hold me back there. They were just going to let me play in the local league and eventually bring me into first grade. But I felt that I was a bit more confident then, a bit more cocky, I suppose. And I knew that if I went and played for Brisbane South, I'd be playing first grade. Wayne told me that. And I set myself a goal when I was about 17. I wanted to play for Queensland, you know, before I was 19 years of age, which I achieved. So I was a bit cocky at that stage. And these come along, but at the end of the day, I wanted to stay under Wayne. I had a career in the police force as well, which was, you know, it was well supported by the police that particular time. So yeah, it was a pretty easy decision to, you know, stay with South.
But it wasn't for the money, was it?
It wasn't for the money.
Yeah.
It was more about the career and opportunity, you know, to play first grade rugby league, obviously. And like I said, I set some goals around, you know, playing for Queensland and hopefully going a bit further.
You were selected for Queensland in 1979. What was the attitude to playing for Queensland pre-Origin?
For me, it was exciting times, but you get the sense, you know, looking back on it in hindsight, that you're just happy to be there. You know, you're just happy to be picked in the Queensland team and play in that arena against, you know, some of your heroes. You know, the players are already playing for New South Wales and Australia, and I think, you know, close enough was good enough attitude of those days, you know. So, and then, you know,
give them a run for their money.
Give a run for the money, and, you know, hopefully get close. One day you might beat them. Someday you never knew that you knew that you're never going to beat them in a series because they were just too strong and too fit, and, you know, just better players than what you were at that particular time.
Origin arrives in 1980. Arthur Beetson is in reserve grade at Parramatta. You lose the 2 interstate matches in May. Arthur turns up in his mid-30s. What were your thoughts? He's going to captain the team.
We didn't even think about his age or if he was playing for a reserve grade for Parramatta at the time. We were more thoughtful around, you know, what a great player he was, what a great man he was, and to be exposed to him at such a young age was, you know, a terrific feeling. And certainly for me, it was, and Wally and all the young ones, Chris Close, it was sort of the catalyst for our self-belief at that level, I think. And I don't think I know it was. And we had over 2 weeks, we had 2 camps, 3 days each, and the first 3 days was all about bonding. That's where the bonding sessions started to come from, and then the next 3 days was all about preparation for the game. But we knew it was a really serious concept, and the Senator Ron McAuliffe and Arthur said to us as such, and because of that we prepared really well, and, you know, took the game, you know, seriously and performed really well.
Your 20th birthday, wasn't it?
It was fantastic. I can't remember too much about the game, but remember a fair bit about what happened afterwards. But yeah, it was good. You know, kicking 7 out of 7 was great, and, you know, but just be part of it. It's just, I was running around. I keep saying that I was running around with a smile on my face. Said, how good is this? You know, to play with some of your heroes. Rod Morris was there, Rocket Reddy, who I followed through the St George era as well. It was such a treat, to be in the same side and playing alongside him.
Because you only had 4 imports, I think. So the team didn't change a huge amount, but as you say, it changed within itself.
Yeah, it did. It changed his attitude. It all of a sudden, we grew another foot. We had this self-belief that, and they instilled that in us. They made them more real, more humanised. So, and because of that, and when we started, obviously, and as you win, you have success. Well, then all of a sudden, it perpetuates and makes you feel, that you start passing those messages on to, players after you as well.
The indelible images from that first match, Choppy Close, I think, is man of the match, Arthur, and yourself. These were, in fact, sort of like the pillars that Origin was built on for Queensland, weren't they? Yeah,
and Wally played lock that particular night as well. So, it was... I still think, people ask me all the time, my favourite, my special moment in Origin was always 1980, because without that game, without the concept, the thinking behind it all, the buy-in by the players, eventually by the New South Wales team, so they reckon, inverted commas, without that, it wouldn't be what it is today.
Yeah, what about the end of the match when all the kids ran on? And everyone stayed around, didn't they? It was historic.
Yeah, well, you can't do that anymore, unfortunately. I love that type of scenario. I love the idea that kids can run on to the Hello Turf of Lang Park, as it was, or run on the Hello Turf for Suncorp Stadium or ANZ Stadium, and get to mix with their, with their heroes. I love that. I love the thought of that, and hopefully one day we can, get past all that and get past all the insurance issues and all the liabilities and all that sort of stuff, and get back to those good old days a little bit.
Arthur coached Origin, and he ended up back at Redcliffe. What's your favourite reflection on him? Your favourite story about the great man?
My favourite story, is a bit personal. When he was coaching the Queensland team in those early 80s, he handed me a note in an envelope, and I took the note out and read it, and he just said how proud he was of me, and who I was, and how proud I stuck up for my culture, which is the Australian South Sea Islander, and to keep on doing well in life, to keep on being successful, and that had a huge impact on me. So I want to tear walls down and lift roofs off everything I possibly can get to, but that simple note, helped me think about life in general and where I were and where I sat, and I think it had an enormous impact on the way I played rugby league as well.
Do you think the wider sporting world is only just beginning to realise the legacy of Arthur? How incredible he was. As an Indigenous man, he
first
went
Indigenous
down and up.
Captain of Australia.
Extraordinary.
And he was principled too. He was principled around where the game should be still project to, and that's the grassroots. And what is the grassroots? That's the people who support our game. That's the blue collar worker, and in those areas where it gives you an opportunity to get on in life. So and he was a big advocate of that, and he was a big advocate for his people as well. Not only in sport but also as part of the general community of Australia. So those sort of things, burn into my DNA as well, and there's sort of things that I feel very deeply about as well.
Mel, in 1980, you're sworn in as an officer in the Queensland Police Force. Were you a good cop?
I was a pretend cop, so I was lucky enough to be stationed at a station or in the summons or warrants area. A 9 to 5 job, Monday to Friday, allows me to play rugby league on the weekend. So I was well looked after. And after I come back from the Kangaroo Tour in '82, the then commissioner called me in his office and told me asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I just wanted to be an instructor at the police academy. So I ended up being an instructor at the academy until the day I left the police force to go to Canberra.
At Souths, you were getting criticised. There was this constant little noise going on, too lazy, not active enough. It was sort of, in brackets, shift him to the forwards, make him do some work. Were you conscious of that?
Well, it was threefold, really, in as early days for me. Not only being labelled lazy, a malingerer, you know, headlines and things like that. As a player, I was a policeman as well, so you know, copper pig basically, and then because of my colour as well. So I mean, there was at those times there was 3 different things that you know you had to put up with, and you know, I mean, like I said, I had a fantastic upbringing. Mum and Dad taught me all the right values, and having someone like Wayne, involved with me not only as rugby league but also in the police force, and his mentorship, and Tony Tester, who you know was the CEO of South, you know, all helped me get through all that.
Your first Kangaroo tour in 1982, and Steve Rogers, no less, is your roomie. How did you enjoy that? Yeah,
it was fantastic. It was not only Steve, but Rocket Reddy and Max Krillich, who were my interlocking roommates as well. So I had those three senior citizens of the Australian team look after me. So I learnt the ropes pretty quick, but it was a great learning curve for me, not only on the field, but certainly off the field as well.
Did Rocket Reddy get to you with his eyebrow razor?
He tried to, and but Steve Rogers stopped him at the last moment, thankfully.
And did Sterlo get you with a stink bomb?
Normally, yes. But he gets Sterlo, everybody with stink bombs, basically, you know.
And did you had a derelict car, didn't you, at some point on that trip? Or
we all had derelict cars, you know, so that foursome I talked about had the derelict car. So, yeah, it wasn't derelict when we bought it, but it was certainly derelict when we left.
When you finished with it.
Yeah.
Frank Stanton had this habit of pulling up the bus short of a destination and making you walk.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. It couldn't have been too popular.
Frank was a hard taskmaster, you know. In 82, we were trained twice a day for nearly the entire English segment, you know. So we actually have to get out of bed 7 o'clock in the morning and go for walks as well. So it was just part of Frank's routine, you know, just to get us flowing in the freezing cold of northern England, basically, and walk to a game. But as it proved, you know, we went through undefeated, you know, some great victories, you know. But Frank was, you know, sort of instrumental in all that. He was tough, like I said, he was tough, and I think we responded pretty well to all that, really. But it was, we come back pretty tired.
Yeah, well, you must have had a good time. Let's take a look at some footage from that tour.
Oh, it's a good high ball. Here's a chance, Meninga. Oh, what power, what size. Off them all the time. Oh, good long ball. And he's in. Meninga. Meninga. He's still going.
I call that a signature Mal run. There was something else in there, the Wally pass.
Yeah.
Tremendous imagination.
Well, yeah, well, we've played it. That was 82, so we've obviously been playing together now for something like 4 years. So it was sort of innate, really. Wally looked and I just nodded. We were down to 12 men in that game, so I was playing centre. They pushed me to the wing. Les Boyd got sent off for a foul act about a minute and a half into the game.
Yeah, that's right.
So we were stuck with 12 men for the whole game, and Wally was on the bench, so he came into 5'8". I think Brett Kenny went out in the centre, so it's just innate, you know. So by playing a lot of footy together, but he had tremendous skills, Wally. He was certainly the best player that I played with in that era.
You come back from that tour, and in 83 and 84, you're still with Brisbane South. It's quite obvious now that you can't be stopped, but you can be sledged. Now, how often did that happen, Mal? Because you heard quite a bit of stuff, didn't you, from the sidelines, and sometimes it got a bit edgy. It
got edgy. Sometimes it embroiled into the game, and sometimes the fans outside of watching the game got embroiled and coming onto the field and things like that. It was, it was a torrid, I should say torrid, but it was a disappointing time in my life, you know, coming back from the 82 tour, and then all of a sudden, you know, coming back successful, the tall poppy syndrome, I guess, you know, again, being a policeman, tall poppy, you know, colour, it all sort of meshed in a, you know, very, you know, big cocktail, as you said, and but we got through it okay.
How important was the reset then with St Helens at the end of 84? Because you'd actually been left out of a test team that year, hadn't you?
Yeah, I did. I was given the captaincy of South by Wayne, and I didn't handle it too well, and my form was down. So I still played Origin. I played the first test match. My goal kicking wasn't the best, so I got dropped for form and for goal kicking. I managed to get my way back into the third game, but and then we continued on through '84. Captain South, I didn't do a very good job in that. We lost the grand final to Wynnum, 42-8 or something like that. I just need a change in in my footy life, really. So I took 8 months off from the police force. They gave me 8 months without pay, and I toofed off over to St Helens, and I loved the experience of the English conditions, and I come back a refreshed and more confident man.
Well, they call the Lancashire Cup final that you played in there one of the best 40 minutes that you played in your career. Now, was that a manifestation of an improvement of form, or was it the opposition? What did you think?
I think, well, a manifestation of a couple of things. Collies, you got to love the game, so I probably lost that passion and fun to play. So through the '84 season, and that certainly come back out in me over there, because I just loved. I love playing rugby league over there, and loved the fans. I loved the atmosphere
the closeness,
the closeness of it all, and the players I played with made me feel extremely welcoming, and we had a lot of success early. That's what you need to do as an Australian player, go and play in England. You need to have
big impression
right from the start. We managed to do that, and because of the catalyst of all those sort of traits, well, that it got to a stage where my confidence was back, my self-belief was back, and I was ready to go when I come back to Australia.
What did it mean to you to win that grand final with Souths in ’85, Lewis, Miles and Dowling playing for Wynnum? You had a fractured kneecap, and it turns out to be a swan song, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was meant a lot. Wayne made some really good changes, brought in some old heads, Norm Carr, Chrissy Phelan, John Elias coming to the club at that particular time. So he brought in, implemented new leadership, allowed me to be who I was and just play footy. And even though I come in, underdone with the broken kneecap, I just wanted to be part of it. It was just one of the best feelings, and I think Wayne even says today it was probably his greatest coaching achievement to do what he did, and the team to achieve what it did in '85 was. Was like I said, a swan song for South, but we did it in the right way, the right manner. To beat them by 2 points was, extraordinary, fantastic effort.
It was Canberra, and not Manly. Now, Manly had Queenslanders, lots of money, and beaches. And Canberra, up to that point, Mal, as John McDonnell put it perfectly, they'd provided comic relief pretty much, in the NRL.
Yeah.
So it was a big decision, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, because of my experience with St Helens, it was a bit of a calculated risk, there's no doubt about that. Don Ferner was the Australian coach at the time, so he was the club coach, so obviously that had a bearing on it for me. Coming from a St Helens situation where it's a one-team town, I felt that there's some value in that. The reserve grade, I think, made the finals the year before, so that they had some up-and-coming young players coming through, which I thought was, was encouraging for the club, and Gary Belcher, Chicka Ferguson, Steve Walters, all these type of guys were willing to come down with me. So at the end of the day, and it was obviously also around my desire not to live in Sydney. My desire. I'm a country boy, brought up in the bush. I just felt that Canberra was the right place for me and my wife at the time.
Your '86 Kangaroo tour, you didn't start a test at centre, but you played a hell of a lot of football, didn't you, on that tour?
Yeah. It
was sort of really different to '82, wasn't it?
It was. And I guess that was a result of what happened through '84. And then Don obviously picked a side through the year that I didn't make. So he was loyal to that, which was fine, but found a spot for me on the bench, which was fantastic. So I played all those test matches except for the third one. I played in the back row.
Back row, yeah.
The back row.
You were in the second row, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
You kept Ciro and Les Davison out of the test team.
I did. Yeah. At that time.
They couldn't have been happy about that.
No, I didn't ask him that question, Tim. But yeah, possibly not. I would suggest. But yeah, I mean, I thought I was still playing pretty good footy, So I still thought I was perhaps in their best 15 in those times. So Don made a decision to put me on the bench, which I relished and enjoyed. So it wasn't the most successful tour for me, but I still made it.
And the French leg was at some points a bit farcical, wasn't it? There was one match you were penalised 28-7, I think it was, which sounds like the score, doesn't it?
Yeah, more or less, yeah. And we ended up winning 50-odd to about 8 or something. Yeah. I remember another game where we were losing at half-time, and there was just so much ambiguity in all the decisions they made, and, you know, we just couldn't get any continuity of attack, and we eventually started to get on top of them, and we just won the game, you know. And once the game got out of their reach, and then it just erupted. One of those ones where all in brawl again, and people from the crowds were coming onto the field, and very enjoyable, I must confess. You know, it's unusual, but it was very, very enjoyable.
And you hired a bus and went to Nice, didn't you?
Yeah, we did Nice and Monte Carlo. We went down to Spain, and it was fantastic. You know, it was really good times. And the good thing about, I guess, the bad thing about it is that international rugby league in France has, you know, dissipated, and, you know, wasn't all that strong, so we didn't have to train that much. So we took little trips that sort of filled in our time, which was, like I said, very enjoyable.
Mal, thanks. We've still got an immense amount of career to cover, and we're going to leave that for League Legends next week. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Tim.
Beautifully to Belcher, back into Meninga. Meninga slashes to the line, and he scored a try. Now Meninga scored a try for Canberra.
This has been a production of Fox Sports.